What is real? Welcome to the What is Real podcast. This is your host, Chaz. Our second patient is Gigi. Infection date, April 16th, 2020. Time of death was 4:20 p.m. Before the end, Gigi and I discussed the nature of reality. Do humans understand reality? Are we anything more than a set of fitness payoffs? Or is there something beyond that? You will stay and listen. You have no other choice. Will you kindly listen to this podcast? Patient 2 recording begins now. I would like to go ahead and welcome Patient 2, Gigi. Hello, Gigi. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Chaz. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and break out of the voice for now, but it's definitely part of the shtick here. I'm really glad to have you on the show. I think we're going to have an interesting talk here. Previously, we had a nice conversation without recording it, and I thought that was pretty successful. So, why not actually record it this time?
I like the format that you have going on. I listened to the first episode with Rockstar Developer a while back. Shout out to him. Love that guy. And it was a very interesting conversation. I can't wait to see where our conversation will lead us.
Absolutely. I believe that he called you out multiple times on that podcast, and that kind of led me to end up talking to you, and here you are, right?
Yeah.
Let's start here. Like, the one thing that's been really on my mind lately is this guy, Donald Hoffman. I had mentioned to you before we started that that's kind of where my brain is likely to be. It's not quite as much now, of course, but it's still kind of there. For anyone that's not aware, Donald Hoffman is this gentleman that is proposing, I'm not sure if it's an alternative hypothesis or what one would call it to be as accurate as possible here, but who cares really at this point? To kind of just be clear, he talks about how the way that we know reality may not be the end. And I think that's kind of intuitively correct to most people, I think. But when he begins to kind of lay out the argument, you begin to kind of look at it and be like, you're getting further and further away from what one might accept, and certainly what a scientist might accept with any confidence. I know you said you kind of looked into it a little bit. How deeply did you go down that rabbit hole?
I went quite far, I would say. I haven't read his book yet, but I listened to about a dozen of his interviews and lectures and talks. And so I think I know what he's trying to say quite well. I think it's a very wild theory. I agree with a lot of his assessments. Like, he talks a lot about how our brains actually work and how our perception works, and how we are not at the end of our understanding in terms of physics. Like, we know that at the current best theories that we have, like relativity theory and quantum electrodynamics, for example, they're very good at explaining some things, but they have the limits. And so he postulates that there has to be something else, like there has to be a deeper theory. And I agree with that a lot. I think everyone who studies physics to some extent agrees with that. But it's difficult for me because, as you said, the longer you listen to him and the deeper you fall down this particular rabbit hole, the crazier it gets. I see myself as a scientist and as a skeptic. So I believe in the claim that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I'm not sure if the theory he has is actually falsifiable. So it's very far out there.
So maybe you could go a little bit further into what he said, because to be honest, I've only listened to 2 of his videos. But I think the best analogy that I saw on one of the videos to really make the issue or the possible reality of our situation clear is the video game analogy. I think it makes it pretty clear. So in the one video that I was watching, they used Grand Theft Auto. I think it's pretty clear. So and I think I made a tweet on this that was pretty popular that talked about this, that if you are a character within Grand Theft Auto, would you be able to, if you worked hard enough and for long enough, quote unquote, would you be able to discover the electrons and basically the computer that underrides your reality? Would you be able to figure that out if you did, something in your game reality to be able to get there? And that's essentially the analogy that Hoffman is pushing forward here. The ultimate reality, or at least the wrapper of our local reality, is in essence some kind of video game interface that we see the Grand Theft Auto world of cars and people and things, but that's only what our limited evolutionary biology would kind of reward us to see. Is that kind of along the lines of what you understood him to say?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And I heard him use the video game metaphor a lot as well. But I think his favorite metaphor is the one of the computer desktop, that if you imagine having a file on your desktop, maybe it's, a folder with a book you have written. And the fact that this folder is blue and rectangular doesn't make the underlying reality of it blue and rectangular, like the electrical impulses and the transistors and the hard disk and everything that's actually responsible for that file being there looks very differently and behaves very differently. Yeah, he has some very interesting ideas. I'm not necessarily saying that he's wrong. I think it's very hard to disagree with these general statements, but he has some very wild ideas in terms of what he speculates is the underlying reality, and he speculates that actually the underlying reality are conscious agents. It's a web of infinite conscious agents. And I was surprised to hear him talk about that and speculate on that, because I think he worked at MIT in the AI lab, and he knows a thing or two about the human brain and how it works. Usually people with his expertise take the opposite stance, that consciousness is an emergent phenomena. It's something that brains do. Like if you have a sufficiently complex neural network, so to speak, then it will become conscious, and it will feel like something to be that thing. That's how brain scientists explain it, more or less. And I think many computer scientists explain it like that as well. Yeah, it's an interesting description, like thinking of what we perceive as reality just as an interface, and we can't really access the underlying reality. Like the underlying reality is hidden from us. And he says all the time that evolution has shaped us with perception symbols. So what we perceive is not the base reality, but it's just useful symbols. To go back to the desktop metaphor, like the trash can on your desktop, on your computer desktop, is a useful symbol. And he also says all the time that we should take those symbols seriously, but we should not take them literally. Like he takes it seriously if he takes the symbol, like the folder which contains the book he was writing for the last 3 years. If he drags that to the trash can, you should take this action very seriously, but it's not literally what's happening. The reality is not that you take this folder and put it into the trash can, so to speak. The reality is that electrical impulses destroy data at the end of the day. Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. But I always found myself disagreeing with him at some point, like if he makes the conclusion that because of all those phenomena, he concludes that the underlying reality is a web of infinite agents, like infinite conscious agents. I can't go that far. So I don't know. What do you think about his claims in regards that the underlying reality is pure consciousness?
So I have many different opinions because there's many different facets of me that, react differently. So the first response, I think, was the very skeptical one, but there are other parts of me, and I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this publicly, but in 2011, I had a psychotic break, and part of the psychosis surrounding that was a narrative very similar to his hypothesis of these conscious agents. It was something like our human internal reality just does not have the ability to view what's actually happening. And what I was kind of in my psychosis at the time was Earth is like a training ground where like the amoeba kind of figure out that they're not amoeba, and then they grow out of Earth and end up in some other kind of reality. I didn't really have a very great idea of that, but I think that kind of idea is not that new, to be honest, because when I was listening to Donald Hoffman, I was remembering a lot of different sources, maybe not a lot, but at least a couple different sources that really reminded me of it. So not only my own psychotic break, where it's like every different possible object and person isn't what they appear to be. They just are what they need to appear to be for your reality to be kind of making sense in a narrative sense for you to graduate to the next stage. I don't know. That's just whatever that was. But then I was also remembering an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of. I'm not a Trekkie, but I saw a bunch of episodes.
Do you remember a character named the Traveler by chance?
No, I don't.
This was a character that was in, I think, the earlier episodes of The Next Generation, and then in one episode of season 7 of The Next Generation. But anyway, the main concept of this character was that he was very mysterious, but how they described him, basically in an episode, he helped to find one of the characters that was missing in like a pocket reality, like a pocket universe. And he basically pushed forward the concept that space-time is two parts of the reality, but there is another part, at least, and that part is human thought. That human thought is an integral part of everything, not just human thought, but just thought. That it permeated more than what we realized and all that. Going even further back, I was kind of reminded of Plato. And Plato kind of had I think he kind of used the term, the reality of the forms or something like that. We're in the reality of being where things are constantly changing, but the reality of forms just is. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense right now on Plato. Anyway, I think what I'm saying is that a lot of these ideas have existed for a long time, that thought and consciousness is more of the base reality, and maybe that's more of a kind of a thing that you can take on as as an intuitive thing. Like that's all we know, that we are conscious beings, and what else could really there be? And that's a really intuitive thing to take on. Going back to the first thing that I said, that my skeptical brain and my brain demanding a concrete demonstration of things makes it very hard for me to take on this idea. And like you said, it may not be falsifiable, so we might not ever be able to take it on. And my question on Twitter about, can a GTA character really discover the base reality just from the game reality? Basically asking from our actual position, can we actually find the ultimate reality from the base reality, given that in a video game, it's literally set up to prevent the game from finding itself. It's just you're manually building it from scratch to do what it does, not to really do much beyond that. So a video game is made not to find itself, because the programmers would never add that in there. That's not needed. So would we ever find the base reality?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also one of the problems with Hoffman's theory. And I feel like he claims that we can probe the deeper reality with some experiments, so to speak. Like he talks about split brain patients, for example, and if you actually split the brain, you split one conscious agent in half, or I think the way he phrased it was that you have like multiple conscious agents, more or less represented by the left and the right hemisphere, and once you cut the however it's called, this cerebellum something
corpus. It's the
corpus cerebellum, something like that.
I'm stuttering really bad right now, but the second word starts with a C. It's
you know what I mean,
Callosum or something like that. Yeah,
the listeners will have to look it up. But once you manage to separate the two halves of the brain, then you're actually kind of interacting with the conscious agents, and you end up having two conscious agents. These are his words, not mine. And I tend to agree with you and what you said. Like as a character in GTA, it's really hard to it's not really hard. It's pretty much impossible to figure out the source code below and influence it in any meaningful way. But now that I'm saying that, I can think of examples where all kinds of people figured out ways to do that in computer games. Like there are speedrunners that manage to write into the memory slots of Super Mario, for example. If you position the sprites just right, and if you time everything right, you can actually manipulate the underlying memory and just do insane warps and just beat the game without moving from the first level, because you just wrote into the memory that you beat the game with the maximum score. That's pretty much like one of the hacks that they do. And so yeah, maybe there would be a way to fiddle a bit with the underlying reality if this metaphor turns out to be true, but I don't know. I think the other interesting thing that he's saying is he talks about evolution a lot, because he bases his beliefs about his theory on experiments he did, computer simulations that build up a microcosm of agents. Like you have a virtual reality, so to speak, and you put agents in them. And he made tests, like simulations spanning multiple generations, to see if the fitness of the agents improves if they see the actual reality, or if it would actually be better if you see something that does not align with the actual underlying reality. I haven't looked into the details of his experiments. I would really like to check out what he actually did, because it sounds very interesting, and I'm very interested in evolutionary algorithms and simulations like that. But he claims that in all the tests he and his team ran, it was never beneficial for the agents to actually see the underlying reality clearly. It was always better, like you always had a better fitness, an evolutionary fitness, like if you only saw the things that mattered, so to speak, and you ignored most of the underlying reality. And yeah, I can kind of understand that. He focuses on that a lot, that it's all driven by evolution. And like he has this phrase where he says that perception is not about seeing the truth, but it's about having kids. And I have a hard time reconciling those two things. That on the one hand, he claims that the true reality is an infinite set of conscious agents, and on the other hand, it's evolution, and you need to have a mechanism that evolves these conscious agents, so to speak. So maybe I'm just not understanding it right, but yeah, it's a wild idea for sure.
I think that there are possible ways to explain that, or at least to try to explain it. I definitely think you need to specify that you're kind of leaving, things you can demonstrate and things you can really talk about without sounding like you're talking about woo-woo nonsense, that you're starting to sound like Deepak Chopra.
Yeah. He actually had a discussion with Deepak.
Really.
Yeah.
I started to think about him a little bit when I was watching Donald Hoffman. I was like, well, I like to think about this stuff and just use my intuition to just pull shit out of my ass and then ponder whether or not I actually pulled out something meaningful by accident, but I have no way of being able to, show it. Honestly, I feel like that concept isn't that far off, that humans are actually amazing at intuitively figuring out the universe. Some better than others, obviously, but one example that I remember is like black holes. One of the first people like describing a black hole, the entire concept was like, I think in the 17th century or something like that, like long before people even had any inkling of a kind of mathematical, aberration or a demonstration like we got more recently. I think most things like this start with just, it could be this, it could be that, and then we just shine our light there until we can really figure it out. I like to think about it, and I like to think that we kind of know the reality actually, that we kind of intuitively know that space-time is not the end. And like how you alluded to at the beginning, I think you were saying that most scientists and most people that work on these things would be at least willing to say that, yes, there's probably something. Is it conscious agents all the way down? Is it turtles all the way down? We can't say that, but there's something.
Yeah, I think most physicists would be just perfectly fine with saying, I don't know. We don't know what's beyond relativity, and we don't know what's like what the unifying theory might be, and we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, for example. I mean, it's kind of a in a space-time framework. When space-time starts at a certain point, asking what's before that, it becomes kind of a nonsensical question anyway. So that's one way out for the physicists. It's
sure,
but it's not something that our mere mortal human brains with our intuitions actually like as an answer. I want to jump back to something you said when you talked about the next generation and the traveler, and how human thought spans its own dimension and stuff like that. There are some interesting ideas around that it's very hard to talk about the universe in any meaningful way, or about anything in any meaningful way, if you remove humans from the picture. Like sizes, for example, become meaningless and irrelevant. Like once you remove humans and any frame of reference, we don't know what kind of time, like what span of time is a long span of time, for example, or a short span of time. And we don't know what's big and what's small, for example. It's really hard to wrap your head around how a universe without any humans would look like, if you could even talk about it in a meaningful way, because we have no idea what the actual like you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
maybe what feels like 100 years to us is just nothing in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we kind of know we kind of know certain time spans. My point is just that it becomes very meaningless to talk about any scale if you don't have a reference point. And for us, obviously, reference point is approximately a human lifespan, or if we talk about in years, our reference point is not fractions of nanoseconds, for example, or even way below that. And it's just interesting to me that you kind of need to have human agents in the universe for it to make sense and to talk about it meaningfully.
Kind of going to the before the universe thing, that kind of reminds me of a lot of different atheist and religious kind of conversations that I've had in the past, where it goes to like a religious person might say something like, well, before the universe, there was XYZ. And like you kind of specified, before there's time doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you need time in order to say before. One thing that I remember taking away from those conversations is the concept of like the cosmos, and there being something more. And now the religious person would go to there being like a cosmic mind. And I think Donald Hoffman might have said that there is some infinite mind or some infinite consciousness, and that's God. It did feel like he was trying to weasel in duality and a lot of kind of religious concepts that I don't really want to jump on board with all that much.
Yeah, his father was a pastor, if I remember correctly. So at least on the weekends, he heard about the infinite consciousness of God a lot, I would guess. But I think it's also interesting that basically all major religions talk about a thing like that. And you mentioned your psychotic break a couple of years ago. And as you know, since we talked privately about it, I had something like that as well last year. Most of the time, I just call it my religious experience, but it's just because I'm not a religious person at all. You know, like I still identify as an atheist, more or less, but it gets harder since I had this experience. To use your terms, obviously it was a psychosis as well, and it was a psychotic break, like if you ask my doctors. But I don't necessarily view it as that. For me, it was a very profound and very calming, might be the wrong word, but I was never afraid, for example, even though I thought I'm dying. And I suddenly all the religious texts and everything that I dismissed outright in the last couple of years kind of made sense, you know, like the one global consciousness, call it God, call it whatever. Also, any concept of time ceased to make any sense for me and my brain. Like when I was in that mode, it felt like time was kind of eternal or standing still. It's very hard to talk about it because I still don't have any meaningful vocabulary to talk about these things. And I actually talked in private a couple of months ago with Brandon Quidham about that, and he helped me a lot to find some resources to better make sense of this experience and also have some better vocabulary. But I'm still struggling very much because I don't really understand what happened to me or to my brain or to whatever, to the universe. And I resonate a lot with what you've said before. I kind of, you know, experientially, I tend to agree with many of the things that Donald Hoffman is saying, and that it might just be that the underlying reality is consciousness, because it sure as fuck felt like it when I had my psychotic break. It felt exactly like that. But the scientist in me says that it's the other way around, you know, like my brain just misfired and lit up like a Christmas tree and played tricks on me. And consciousness is something that comes out of brains and not the other way around. I don't know.
I feel like, you know, when you're talking about you're just made to feel that way, I feel like you almost practically described a psychedelic experience. And it's the same kind of question, I guess. It's like, are you just jacking up your brain? Are you just, you know, going on a little vacation inside your brain, and all you're really doing are just messing with the chemicals, and that's all that's really going on? Or I think like what Joe Rogan might say, are you putting your mind in tune with some other reality, man? Like on some level, you know, it sounds like something you can kind of dismiss as some hippie is, you know, dropping too much acid, smoking too much weed. But as someone that does do both of those things, I don't really have a low opinion on those things. It's hard to mesh that world with, you know, the world of science, with the world of concrete demonstrations. But I guess you have to ask yourself, you know, if in the 17th century or earlier or whenever you had your scientist brain and someone told you that we were going to find out everything that we found out about the universe by now, back then, would they believe you? Would they be able to have the demonstration to believe in a black hole, for example? They'd be like, no, I can't believe that. I mean, even scientists 20, 30 years ago would have good reason to be skeptical of a black hole because they had no ability to demonstrate it. They had no gravitational waves. They had none of that. You know, they could only suspect. We could literally be talking about something that is true, but we're just bounded to our reality. Like if, let's say this conscious agent thing is true, we might be forever stuck from actually demonstrating it until, like, because I think the tail end of his theory or hypothesis is when you die, you don't die, that your reality just changes to something else. Because I think what I was mentioning before when I started going to the beginning of the universe was the concept of nothing. That the religious will be like, well, why isn't there a something instead of nothing? The response that I have really began to kind of take on is, how can there ever be nothing? To me, something is the only thing that could possibly exist. I can't know that really, but to me, that seems like very intuitively correct, that there can only be something. And if that's true, maybe the only something that can actually exist is consciousness. If we just take that on, that's a lot to take on, but if we take that on, we can just say that everything is consciousness, and consciousness has built rules for itself for whatever reason. And maybe those rules are the evolution that we experience of, like, if we kind of go back to my psychotic break, and I don't know why we would, but let's say that we did, that there's different levels in conscious reality, that there's different modes. And this is something similar to what Hoffman said, that there's like every different possibility that could exist does exist. And I feel like that's something along the lines of what some scientists would jump on board with. Some, not a lot, I don't think, but some, because it's not easily demonstrated. But all different realities exist out there, and you could probably even go further down that path. And I think this even touches on what other scientists have gone into, with there being like a more than 4 dimensions, like up to like 11 dimensions in order to explain string theory. I'm probably just talking about like a lot of buzzwords right now, so I apologize.
No, that's fine.
I guess what I'm trying to say is there is so many loose ends, so many possibilities, and so many things out there that could interconnect. Would you really be surprised if this was the answer, I guess?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I would be surprised, because in my mind, I don't know. It depends. I think it also depends on what you exactly mean by consciousness and how you would best describe it and define it. And Hoffman has a mathematical definition of consciousness. I haven't looked into it in detail, so that's another thing that I still need to do, because I would be interested in how he describes it. But I think it would make more sense that you start with the simplest building blocks that you can start. So you don't start with consciousness. You start with like the physicists tend to do. You start with subatomic particles and some very simple rules, and other things emerge from that. And I really like simulations of this kind of phenomena. I don't know if you're familiar with the Game of Life, for example. Do you know that? It's like a computer science thingy.
I heard of the guy that invented that dying recently, but I had not heard of it previous.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically a cellular automata. It works like a huge chessboard. Like, imagine having a huge grid, and you have very simple rules. And the rules are basically, you have a field in this grid can either be black or white. And I'm ashamed to admit that I don't even know the rules by heart, but basically it's if you have 2 black thingies close to it, they will mate and they will create a new one. But you can also have overpopulation. So if a black thing is surrounded by 2 or more, I think, then it will die off and it will turn white. So there are some very, very simple rules. I'm sure I messed up the rules, but it's I think you get the idea. With this very, very simple rule set, you can build all kinds of things. And mathematicians have even proven that you can build computers with just this system. Like it's a Turing complete system. So you could build anything with it. It's really amazing. It's really fascinating. Like, in my mind, it kind of would make sense that our reality works in a similar fashion, that you have very simple building blocks and very simple rules, and the phenomena that emerge from that are very complex. And I really liked what you said, that the only thing that makes sense in your mind is that there is actually something, And I tend to agree with that. It's really hard to think of a universe that is just nothing, just pure nothingness, you always kind of need a reference point, you know? You need something to take away that you have nothing. So you can't even think of nothing without thinking of something. That's a weird fact in of itself. But I'd like to go back to the stuff you said about psychedelics, because when I had my quote unquote religious experience, I felt so high. You wouldn't believe. I mean, you probably would believe you had a very similar experience, I imagine. And you actually took psychedelics. I never took high doses of psychedelics, so I never was out of my mind high. But when I was in that state, I kind of knew that that's how it has to feel like. You know, that's everything I heard described by people that went through an experience like that suddenly made sense in my mind, and I was like, okay, that's what it feels like. That's what dying feels like. That's what thinking you become a god feels like, and stuff like that. What I found interesting is that Donald Hoffman actually never took psychedelics as well, so we have that in common. So he arrived at his theories without the aid of psychedelics. Ever since I had this experience, actually a little bit before I had this experience, I became very interested in taking psychedelics, and I still want to do that. Like I want to, I want to, in the most responsible way possible, experience like one of those wild trips. I'm just not sure yet if my brain could handle it right now. I might have to wait a couple of years and see how that goes.
Somebody out there, get Gigi some DMT, please.
Yeah. DMT, ayahuasca, all the good stuff. I like all of that sounds very interesting to me. And I never experimented with drugs too much. I was more the alcohol drinking guy, you know. But that got way better when I got older as well. I want to actually come back to something you said about black holes and how physicists probably would have a hard time believing it if you told them what we know now, like 100 years ago or even longer than that. And I'm surprised that we didn't talk about quantum mechanics yet, and just a very weird quantum world, because Hoffman talks about it a bunch. Like he brings it up in some of his talks, that we kind of know that reality is very weird, or what we perceive as reality is very weird. And I was just waiting for you to bring up quantum mechanics and just quantum weirdness to drive home the point. What do you know about the weird quantum experiments, like the double slit experiment, or maybe even like delayed choice eraser experiments and stuff like that?
So yeah, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube about those things. You know, shout out to Space Time on YouTube. Is a really good show.
Yeah.
So I understand those things where, you know, you have spooky action at a distance, where you have two correlated pairs of particles, I believe, that will be able to quote unquote transmit information. I'm not sure if a scientist would actually agree with that, but would transmit information seemingly at an impossible speed. And I think what Hoffman was saying, that the reason why it seems to be spooky and weird is because we just don't get the full context. That if we were able to step back and look at what's actually happening, it would seem very normal and easily explained, possibly by going to the higher dimensions. Like I guess this entire conversation, I was alluding to the quantum world and the quantum effects, but I guess I just didn't say it specifically. But the place that I kind of go is the concept that consciousness is I don't even know if this makes sense in reality, so please excuse me, but some kind of quantum system or something like that. That, like, I was watching these videos about D-Wave and quantum computers and stuff, and damn it, I kind of lost what I was going to say. Fuck.
D-Wave.
Yeah, D-Wave, but like I think it was something like quantum different realities, that you're leveraging, you know, all possible different parallel universes in your quantum computation, that you're building a machine that spans all of them, or something like that.
Yeah, that's one of the explanations how a quantum computer works. I think the honest answer is that nobody really knows. Nobody really understands what's going on. just to clarify, in case some physicists are listening.
Please.
The spooky action at a distance, that's a funny thing, because you actually can't transfer information. You kind of know that something is happening, and if you have those particles that are correlated, as you said, I'm missing the correct English word. In German it's verschränkt, so it's give me a second. Entangled. There you go. If you have two entangled particles and they are in this entangled state, even if you move them apart a very long distance, like in particle terms, there were even experiments made spanning many miles. So you can do some very interesting cryptography even with it. Like you can do quantum cryptography with entangled systems like that. Because what's kind of happening is, once you do a measurement on one particle, the other particle changes instantaneously, and we don't even have a good idea what that means instantaneously, because as far as we know, instantaneous means with the speed of light. Like the speed limit in our universe is the speed of light, according to Einstein's relativity theory. And it doesn't make sense to have anything change faster than the speed of light. But that seems to be happening. But the interesting thing is that you can't really extract any meaningful information out of the change. So you can't actually transfer any information. So we don't have any faster than speed of light information technology, like you can't send an email or any signal faster than the speed of light. We can kind of prove that both particles changed at the same time. So something did happen faster than the speed of light, but we don't know what. And to find out what happened, we need to take another measurement, and this destroys the whole thingy. So you need to correct for the measurement you made, and you have to convey this information, like the measurement correction, so to speak, via traditional means. And so the best you can do is speed of light. But we kind of know that something weird is going on, and that's also, I think, why Einstein called it the spooky action at a distance. It's really weird. It doesn't really make sense. Something is going on, but we can't really use it to build any nice gizmos that actually communicate faster than the speed of light. Anyway, that was like a small physics lesson for you guys. But it's definitely true that something very weird is going on in the underlying quantum reality, and it's the best physics theory that we have. So as far as physicists can tell, the underlying reality really is quantum based. And what I think is very interesting is it seems that a lot of those systems, they behave differently depending on the amount of information you can extract from them. Because there are also those, if you watch the space-time videos, you actually have to have seen it, because they have a video about the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, where you basically have a double slit experiment. And if you don't know the double slit experiment, it goes basically like this, that you can't tell if a photon went through one slit or the other. And the photons behave like waves if you don't measure where the particle went through, and they more or less behave like particles when you measure where the photon went through. So it's a really weird experiment, and you can actually do it at home. So I suggest, if you don't know anything about the double slit experiment, just look it up, and maybe even try to build a small contraption with a laser, and there are tutorials online on how to do that. But anyway, you can set up an experiment where you actually measure where the photon went through which slit. So this should destroy the interference pattern. So it should more or less behave like a particle. But if you destroy the information about the measurement, like if you never read the measurement, so to speak, then it still works. The interference pattern is still there. And I just, the last couple of years, I tried to wrap my head around that, how that could possibly be. And I'm still failing. The best reason I can come up with is that the underlying reality is actually information based, and there's a nice paper about that. It's called It from Bit, and I can't remember who the author is. Very famous quantum physicist, and I should know actually, but I'll have to look that up.
Do you want to kind of go into that a little bit more and explain that a little bit? Because that's kind of blowing my mind here right now.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. The the set of theories that talks about that is called digital physics. So and I think the first paper that postulated something like that was It by Bit, or it was one of the first. Archibald Wheeler wrote it. So very famous physicist. So if you're into physics and weird theories, that's definitely something to look into. I think it's kind of similar to the theory of Donald Hoffman, that the underlying reality is just infinite consciousness, so to speak. But in this case, the underlying reality is pure information. And I really like that idea for multiple reasons. It's easy to think about in that way, since I have a computer science background, and it kind of makes sense in my worldview and in my brain. But also it kind of explains how, I'm not sure if it explains it, but what's really weird about our physical world is that mathematics works so insanely well to describe it. Like all the quantum phenomena that we talked about, all the quantum weirdness, quantum particles are actually best described by a vector of imaginary numbers. So, like the square root of -1. Like the imaginary numbers and the square root of -1, it was more or less like at least it felt to me like a mathematical trick that mathematicians came up with, and then suddenly you have a new set of numbers, and they had no real application. It was just a mathematical curiosity, as far as I know. But it turns out that you need this mathematical curiosity to describe quantum states and quantum particles. And so it's kind of weird that we haven't found any phenomena in the real world yet that we can't describe very accurately mathematically. And so it kind of makes sense, in my opinion, that the underlying reality of our universe is mathematical or maybe information based. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I guess I don't have that strong of an opinion, but I guess my mind is going to, could you be talking about the same thing, information theory and, conscious agent theory or hypothesis or whatever? Is that the same thing, and we're just talking about it in different couched terms?
Yeah, it might be.
Because the thing about the consciousness, the conscious agent hypothesis, a lot of it is you have component parts of consciousness, or consciousness particles or something. I don't even know, but because basically what he's saying is that you're made up, because we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but people are made up of many individual consciousnesses. And I think that seems somewhat intuitive. When you think about stuff, sometimes you think about things this way, sometimes you think about things that way, and there seems to be a kind of soup of people inside of you sometimes.
Yeah.
It seems kind of intuitive, but I like the idea too, because it explains a lot of things inside of me and how other people work, and it might, it just seems like it could really explain things. But anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of losing my track here, I guess.
No worries. Heavy stuff.
It is. It's a very complicated one, but
to be fair, Hoffman talks about that kind of problem as well. Like he talks about the problem of consciousness and also the hard problem of consciousness, and that's related to solipsism in a way. Like you can't really prove that other people are conscious, and only you can experience the world as you experience it, and only you can be the conscious agent of your universe. And there's no two ways about it. You even logically, even if you could swap bodies, you would kind of you would still have the same problem.
Nothing would change.
Yeah. There's no way to prove that any other agent that you interact with is actually conscious. And I think that's an interesting rabbit hole in itself, because it also relates to AI and other things. And I think the most beautiful solution to the problem. As some people would say, it's not really a solution; it's a cop out. But I still think it's beautiful. Is the Turing test by Alan Turing? I think it was. I mean, he made so many great contributions to the world and to science, but I think on a philosophical level, that was his biggest contribution, because basically what he's saying is, if a computer acts like a human being, you have to accept him as a human being. So that's a very compressed and dumbed down version of the Turing test, because that's what we are doing all the time. If you interact with another person and the person behaves like a conscious agent, and to you it feels like the other person has the same inner processes that you do, so you kind of assume that it's the same thing. And the Turing was basically saying that if we ever come to a state where computers are really good at that as well, like they can imitate it perfectly, then you basically have to take that as at face value and just accept that the computer is conscious now.
Do you think we're ever going to get to the point where we do actually have conscious machines here?
Yeah, I actually do. I even think that we're close, which, might sound weird to some people, but it's, like I'm in my mid-30s now, so I lived through the rise of computing and the rise of the internet and the rise of mobile computing and stuff like that. And it just is obvious to me that all the computational advancements that were made in the last couple of decades, they're still on an exponential trajectory. And if this continues, it won't take much longer for the sheer computation power of our devices to exceed the computation power of small insects and dogs, and soon after that other mammals, and then humans, and then the smartest humans that ever lived, and so on. And I tend to agree with the assessment of Ray Kurzweil on that regards. He is a very clear thinker in regards to exponentials, and he invented quite a few interesting things, because I think he was able to invent those things because of his insights. It's also a good counterpoint to Hoffman's theories, because Ray Kurzweil, he actually takes the opposite stance, that consciousness is an emergent phenomena. It emerges from the brain, so to speak. And he wrote a very interesting book, How to Build a Brain, I think it's called. And he lays out very clearly how the brain works, how the different pieces, so to speak, fit together, how different layers of neural networks produce something that can, for example, read a page of text. And you have, we kind of know how this works now, because we can build it, and we can build OCR systems, and we can build neural networks that can learn how to read, and can learn how to read handwritten numbers and stuff like that, and can do even way more complex things. I mean, everyone kind of knows that we have that now, because you all have to prove that you're not a robot, and you have to help our coming overlords to identify street signs and crosswalks and cars and whatnot. So behind that are insanely large neural networks that have the same mechanisms built in silicon that we have built in our brains, that you have one module that takes care of just differentiating the contrast, for example, like differentiating black from white and finding the edges of the letters. And then you have another module that takes care of reading whole words or individual letters. And then you have one module that tries to understand what kind of language it is, and tries to understand the language, understand the grammatical structure, and so on and so forth. Ray Kurzweil lays out that it's basically for all our processes in our brains, including consciousness, it works in this kind of way, in this kind of nested, multi-level, layered way. And I like that explanation quite a lot. And it's obviously a counterpoint to Hoffman's ideas.
Just to be the devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Would there be any way to integrate both? Like, could Hoffman be right, and we could still, quote unquote, construct portals and interfaces that lead to other consciousness somehow?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I think one bridge that would kind of make that work is if something is going on in our brains that we don't understand well enough yet. Like, people will probably hate me for saying that now, but what if some processes in our brains are, for example, making use of this quantum weirdness that we talked about? Like some things in our brains are quantum based. What if that's true? Most people think, like most scientists think, that's not true, and you could actually, in theory, you could build a perfectly normal human brain using another substrate, like using silicon chips, for example. If you knew what you're doing and you build it well enough, then that should be possible by most estimates of most scientists. But there are some theories that actually postulate that some parts of our brains work quantum mechanically, and Hoffman references that as well. I'm not sure. Maybe because of that, he could be right. Like maybe there is a connection to a deeper thing, or to an underlying universal consciousness or something like that.
As a follow-up to that, what is your opinion of quantum immortality?
Quantum immortality? I think I never heard the term, so you have to expand on that.
Okay. So quantum immortality is the concept that your consciousness is the one that survives out of all the possible quantum selves, because all the ones that die and don't exist anymore. Or I'm probably not saying this totally correct, but it's essentially where you'll always live because your quantum self is the one that survives, or something.
Okay, I see. I think I know the concept behind it. Like there is, as we said before, there are some very weird things going on in the quantum world, and one interpretation of it is the multi-world interpretation, that actually all things that are possible are happening all the time, but the universe splits in two. And so what you're trying to say is that should be true for like all physical phenomena in the world. Like every minute quantum interaction would generate a new universe. So all possibilities actually exist. And quantum immortality would be just, you would be on the path where you live, basically pretty much forever, I guess, but the longest. Let's not be outrageous.
I would even take it a bit further.
I never heard that. It's a very interesting idea. I don't know. I think if that were to be true, I would expect to see some older people, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but please go ahead.
Here's how I would describe it, and here's how I've kind of built it inside my head. It's that you live your human life and then you switch to a different life. You die in human terms, but then you switch to a different kind of life. So one kind of very easy way to model that is like you wake up as an alien on a flying saucer doing alien things. Like that's very silly and simple, but like that's the kind of place that I think you would kind of go. Or you could take it even more absurd and you kind of begin to think of, Rick and Morty is really good at doing this kind of cosmic horror kind of thing where you're totally disconnected from what we really think of. So like maybe like a Cronenberg monster or whatever, of like the kind of amorphous blob of body parts or whatever, just whatever. You can't even imagine it. It's like it's some just different reality, different rules, different modalities of sense of everything. Like we're just not set up to describe it even. It's just like it's that far off from our perspective. Like that could be the next mode of our life, or whatever that means. And then from there, that might end, and then it might shift to something else after that. And then that's basically what your consciousness experiences. And it may not even remember the previous thing, and that might be reincarnation, whatever. I don't know. That might be my current consciousness just trying to latch on to some explanation in order for me to have a plausible way of not dying or ending or something. That's plausible. But it could also be the reality, because it's like I don't I don't know that my consciousness started. I have memories of it, of this human life, but does that mean anything?
Yeah. Again, it's very hard, if not impossible, to falsify a theory like that. So I don't know. I think it's obvious to me that humans would like to live forever, and all religions pretty much talk about it. They either talk about an afterlife or talk about reincarnation or some other cyclical way of staying alive. I don't know. I'm still enough of an atheist to not believe in a life after death, and I think you would run into even mathematical and logistical problems if that were true. Like if everyone would live forever, we would have endless people, because obviously babies are born. So you've two people, two conscious experiences, and then you have a third one. And you could argue that all the whole consciousness is either, as Hoffman says, the base reality, or the conscious agents lived before and had a eternal life before that, and it's just like you said, the human form now. I don't know. I obviously I would like to believe a version of that, maybe, eternal life. And I think the Ray Kurzweil and the Singularity people, they would like to believe that as well. They are talking about living forever, either through bioenhancements or through uploading yourself into the cloud or something. But yeah, I believe I will die one day. I also think that Ray Kurzweil will die, for example. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe in radical life extension, for example. That's a different topic. I believe that that's true. I think we could improve our biological bodies to live maybe multiple 100 years, but maybe even longer than 1,000 years. But I'm not sure if you would want that even. I don't know. I think death is an integral part of life, and I really liked the Zen Buddhist view, the yin and yang view of that process, that life implies death, and you can't even have a meaningful life without death, I would think.
I mean, I think that's fair, but I think what's also fair is that humans, whatever humans are, if anything, they're creatures of resistance, curiosity, tenacity, and all these things of being able to overcome issues. And I think death is one of those issues. Now, I don't think we can permanently overcome it. It's just extending it to stupid time periods that don't make sense to our current selves. I think it's like getting to living for hundreds of trillions of years or something, like timescales like that. But I still see an end at some point. Like I've kind of had this thought experiment for years where, okay, I've managed to survive for 1,000 years. Okay, now I can survive for 10,000 years. Now I can survive for 1,000,000, 1,billion, 10 trillion, 100 trillion. But at some point, there's a hard stop. If it's like the end of the universe, the heat death of the universe, where like at the very end, I'm kind of huddling around the last black hole, using its rotational energy to survive, and then even that goes out, and I'm kind of like, well, fuck.
Yeah, that seems to be the ultimate fate as far as we can tell. So that's kind of depressing, Like I know it depressed me for a while, that in the end it will all go to shit. And as far as we can tell, the universe will keep expanding, and we are kind of in this glorious period now where we can actually see quite far in the universe. And since the expansion is accelerating, as far as we know, there will be a point in time in a couple trillion years where our galaxy is the only galaxy we will see, because all the other galaxies will have reached escape velocity, and the light of them won't even reach us. So you will just see perfect darkness outside, and you wouldn't even know that other galaxies exist. And again, it's kind of weird, because who knows in what situation we are right now. Maybe it looked even we can't even think of what it might have looked like 10 billion years ago. I mean, there are theories about it, but it's fun to turn this conclusion on its head and think about our current state as well. But yeah, the living a long time and the life extension stuff. I mean, if you follow the theories of the singularity people and of those people that actually think about those things in a very serious manner, who knows what's possible? Physically possible. So many things are physically possible that it's really hard to imagine. And I always like to, when I talk about those things, mostly over beers with friends, I like to bring up the thought experiment. Just imagine in the future where you have super intelligent AI and you have nanobots and you have like bio-based nanobots that can actually heal you very quickly or reconfigure you in certain ways. It's not outrageous to think that you could drive down a highway with your car and you have a horrible accident and you're just completely crushed and you're instantly dead and your car is broken and everything is horrible. And it's not outrageous to think that we could build technology that actually disassembles your car and disassembles you and assembles you back just the way you were like 10 minutes ago, and from an outsider perspective, it would look like a magical thing was happening and time would reverse and you would actually, like all the atomic and subatomic pieces would put themselves together in the exact perfect way again, that you have something like a safe state in a computer game and then you can just go on living again. And that's as far as we know, all of that is physically possible. We just don't know how to do it yet. So I like those kind of thought experiments that you, as you said, you then can go on living for 1,000 years and maybe 10,000 years and what have you. But again, as far as we can tell, just from the physical universe we're living in, there seem to be hard limits, and that's kind of depressing.
Kind of on the tail end of that here, we're kind of reaching towards the end here, but I want to keep on going at least a little bit more. The main thought that I think of when I kind of get the end is I go back around to Isaac Asimov, The Last Question, and I'm sure you're aware of that one, right?
It's been a while since I've read it.
Sure, but I'm sure you remember the whole let's reverse entropy thing inside of there.
I do.
And I think that's the hard limit that we're talking about here, that entropy is just going to keep going up, et cetera, that we're going to reach the universe so spread out, so, just basically everything just going to be dust, even smaller than dust. How do you survive that? And, one possible idea was using the infinite consciousness of humanity for billions of years to calculate a way to figure it out. Do you think if that's an even coherent concept? Because I've tried to say that on Twitter before, and people have yelled at me that reversing entropy is not a coherent concept. I'm fine with that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert by any means, but I like to think that I can think intuitively in certain spaces and at least kind of pick at some things.
I think it's perfectly fine with what you said. I think, just the process of life is a local reversal of entropy, but I think the local is important, and maybe that's what the Twitter people were angry about. But who knows, Twitter people are angry people. They will yell at you for anything, really.
It's true.
It doesn't matter what you post. So yeah, I very much agree with the stuff you just said, that and also what Asimov wrote about, that it is a battle against entropy. And I think the purpose of life is the local reversal of entropy and hanging on as long as you can. And I think Rockstar developer, your Patient Zero, talked about that as well. I think that's his stated purpose in life, that he will do whatever he can to do his part in the local reversal of entropy, right?
Right.
I think he said that. What I tend to agree with Hoffman is the sentiment of there might be a deeper thing, a source code. And maybe if we can get access to that, then we really would have superpowers and we could reverse entropy for good, so to speak. And I think that's a hopeful thing to think about, because to drop another name, Eric Weinstein talks about that a lot as well. He has his own theory of everything, and he talks about it in that sense that we obviously know that, like, he thinks that string theory is a dead end, and he agrees with everyone else that the current quantum mechanical theories like quantum electrodynamics and quantum chromodynamics and stuff like that, and relativity is not enough to explain things. So there is a deeper theory. He thinks he has a candidate for it, and his main motivation to work on that is, who knows what we could build and who knows what we could do if we would have access to the source code, so to speak. And he's also of the opinion that we kind of need to leave this planet because our time here is very limited, and we might be stupid enough to blow ourselves up, or in at least a couple million or billion years, I don't know, probably billion years, the sun will swallow the earth. So our time is very limited, and I like this optimistic view that we were able to build atomic bombs and hydronuclear bombs just with our theoretical breakthrough in physics. And now we can build all kinds of interesting things also with our breakthroughs in quantum physics. And who knows what we can build with the next kind of big breakthrough. And maybe we can even, get to the source code of our simulation, and that would be fun.
I'm going to dupe so much Bitcoin.
That would be easy then, yeah. That's right.
All right. To end the show here, let's have a terrible Bitcoin conversation to scare off all of the non-Bitcoin people. But in a world where maybe we do discover the source code, does Bitcoin have the same kind of value?
Wow.
Sorry.
I'm not even sure if I have a good answer. I would have to think about it for quite a while. I'm not drunk enough for that right now.
Right.
But,
right. We have to go jump on TFTC.
Yeah, exactly. A bottle of whiskey, and I can answer that question fluently without a problem. But it's an interesting thought experiment that I tweeted out quite a while ago, like over a year ago, I think, is if we would find something that could produce infinite energy, or if we would have free energy, like in a Star Trek universe, pretty much. If we would have free energy, would Bitcoin be in danger? Like, could you attack Bitcoin in a meaningful way? And I think it's a similar question, because Bitcoin it's weird in that way that it's not a physical thing. All of it is, it's bound to our physical world, but it's still an information construct, and we also, as a swarm intelligence, agree every 10 minutes pretty much what Bitcoin is. And I don't know if Bitcoin would lose all its value because of a scientific breakthrough. People talk about, for example, quantum computation be able to crack all the encryption used. That's only partly true. And I think we could also modify Bitcoin in a way to make it resistant to such attacks if we had to. Like, we could switch to quantum resistant algorithms, and those do exist, and people are working on that. And interestingly enough, most of those quantum resistant algorithms, they are information based. So that's something to think about as well, maybe.
There's so much to dig in here, man. It's like I have like 30 more questions that I'm kind of mulling over in my head here. But
pick the best two.
Well, how about this? I'm going to kind of stay on Bitcoin here a little bit just to close out the show. Do you think that Bitcoin is an alien consciousness from a parallel universe attempting to install itself?
Oh, I really like all those outlandish theories, but no, I don't think that. I think Satoshi was very human, and if you study the history of Bitcoin, it's apparent that, like, he made many mistakes, and he wasn't perfect at all, and it was obviously bootstrapped from very humble beginnings. But I love those On the other hand, if the AI or the alien super intelligence would be really smart, it would obviously make us believe all that Satoshi was human and it started small and so on, and it was the plan all along. I really like those theories. I think my most favorite one is the time traveling AI that bootstraps itself. That's fun to think about. But no, I think Bitcoin's origins are actually quite humble and human in origin. I also believe that Satoshi was one person and a man at that. Sorry for all the women, but he self-identified as a man. And, most people that were early in Bitcoin were men. And I don't want to go into the societal reasons for that or what the reasons might be, but I think it was one person, a man at that, and he did it alone.
I would probably jump on board with that. Do you think it was Hal Finney?
I don't know. I have my theories. I flip flop on those kind of questions. I hope we never find out. I think it's important for Bitcoin to have this mystery around its creation, and I really hope that we never find out. It might have been Hal. Some people that are still alive would be candidates as well. I think Nick Szabo, for example, would be capable of creating Bitcoin, would have been capable of creating Bitcoin. I don't think he is Satoshi, but there are some people that could actually pull it off and would have the background to do it.
Does it matter?
No, I don't think it matters. I think it's very similar to other interesting things that were discovered or created or invented, however you want to put it. It doesn't matter who invented the wheel, for example. It doesn't matter who Pythagoras was, for example, and what kind of political views he had. The theorems are sound anyway, and they're very useful. And I think Bitcoin is sound and is very useful, and it doesn't really matter who invented it.
Okay, and I think my last question is, do you have any inspirational thoughts about the next 10 years of, the future of humanity?
Inspirational thoughts for the future of humanity. Ending it with a very easy question. I don't know. I think people like Elon Musk and other very ambitious people, they have the right idea in mind. I think it's good to strive for the next level, so to speak. And just Elon Musk came to my mind. But whatever the next level might be in your opinion, it might be a return to more localism, for example, or a return to your own consciousness. And I think in the next 10 years or the next couple of decades, I hope that a lot of individuals and a lot of people will keep on striving in whatever that means for them. If it means building rockets and and building a base on Mars, so be it. If it means working on artificial intelligence, so be it. If it means taking LSD and exploring your own mind, so be it. So I think stagnation is what actually kills, and as we talked about, entropy is what kills. So if you work on exploring something, maybe improving yourself, improving the state of the world just a little bit in your own way, then I hope that should be inspiration enough for all of humanity.
I think that's a perfect way to end the show, and I would agree. I think, honestly, most people right now are training to go live on Mars at some point in the future. Maybe not literally, but I see cell phones, our computing technology, our instant communication as kind of things, the kind of building blocks that we would need in order to become kind of pioneers and scientists on Mars. The kind of people, the kind of generalists that we would need on Mars to really survive up there, explore up there, do research up there. And I think that kind of optimistic vision is, I think, something that we're really lacking in our culture right now. Not to jump on a soapbox or anything, but I feel like there needs to be more of that. Like Star Trek used to do that really well, and I don't think it does that really well anymore. And I miss that. I want to have like a thing that shows me that humans are on the path of like figuring shit out and not succumbing to cynicism. Like I'm as when I was a 20 something, I was full of cynicism, but I think in my 30s I don't have that anymore. I'm very optimistic for the future, and I hope we all find a more beautiful tomorrow, as terribly cliche as that sounds.
Yeah. I think you put it perfectly. I think so too. We shouldn't be afraid to dream, and dream big at that. Why not? We might as well give it our best shot.
And we'll go ahead and end the show there, Gigi. I really appreciate you being my second patient here.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. It was a lot of fun.